A simple farmer with super strength saves people around him. Under the scorching sun, a battle unfolds between a group of people and a dragon. The guild struggles against the enormous dragon, which breathes fire and swings its tail. The guild is forced to retreat because the dragon is too powerful, large, and formidable to confront. In another place, a farmer named Al was tending to his crops, which looked like eggplants from a hentai anime. You know what I mean? Suddenly, Al heard a rumbling sound and anticipated rain. As he was transporting his plants, he received a notification of leveling up to level 10. Al was thrilled about this development. Then, Testa arrived and shared in his joy. Al also had skills in fishing, also at level 10, which made Testa slightly jealous. When Testa saw Al catch 3 fish at once, Testa was truly impressed by Al's abilities, especially since Testa was a fisherman himself, but Al proved to be more adept. This made Testa feel envious. Then Al received a new notification. He had the option to combine his skills with others available. Al was slightly intrigued by the nature lover's skill, literally mature lovers, but he didn't pay much attention to it and quickly hurried away. On his journey, Al was grateful that the rain didn't come. But then he heard the roar of a dragon and realized it was still chasing the guild group from earlier. The dragon breathed fire, prompting the group to retreat. On the side, Al held a carrot in his hand, intending to distract the dragon and threw it with his power, the high-speed cutter, but in a vegetable version, despite the name being ruined. His attack was so powerful that it destroyed the dragon in just one strike, without damaging the carrot he used. The guild members who witnessed this were shocked and curious about who had performed such a feat. Even Al himself was surprised by the sheer power of his attack. He quickly left the scene and headed to the kingdom market. Shortly after, the guild members arrived at the spot where Al had defeated the dragon and were intrigued by the horse carriage tracks left behind by Al. After arriving at the kingdom gate, everyone had to show their identity to gain permission to enter. As Al finished showing his identity, he heard a scream from a blonde-haired girl being kidnapped by a man on horseback. As the man approached the gate, Armek performed an incredible rescue by leaping in and saving the blonde girl. Enraged, the man drew a knife and attacked Al, but once again Al defeated him thanks to his precognition skill. The guards quickly apprehended the man. After the man was secured, the blonde girl thanked Al. However, suddenly a bell rang, causing Al to look panicked and quickly leave the girl. She tried to ask for the name of her rescuer, but Al didn't care and hurried away. Fortunately, Alabama still managed to deliver his vegetables in time. Afterward, he hurried back home. On his way, some guards suddenly blocked his path. Al thought he needed to show identification to leave as well. But then he heard a girl's voice. It was the blonde girl he had rescued earlier, who turned out to be Princess Fallwise Magus of the Magus Kingdom. Al was bewildered that a princess would seek out a farmer like him. Fal intended to ask Al to serve the Magus Kingdom. Upon hearing this, Alabama awkwardly attempted to refuse outright, but hesitated out of fear of repercussions. Fal offered him a high-paying job, but Al insisted he only wanted to live as a farmer for the rest of his life. Fal then offered him a large farm and 10,000 subo if Al agreed to work for the kingdom. Al questioned why the princess wanted to recruit him. Fal explained that the man Al had defeated earlier had attributes totaling 500 points, and there were different ranks based on attribute points, ranging from ordinary citizens to legendary heroes. Fal asked Al to show his attribute points, but Al hesitated to reveal his total, knowing it exceeded even that of a legendary hero. Just then, the guild members who had fought the forest dragon arrived at the gate and reported their victory, displaying a green crystal. However, they clarified that they hadn't defeated the dragon. Upon hearing this, Fal realized it was Al who had accomplished the feat. Unfortunately, Alabama had already fled with his horse and carriage. In the kingdom, it was reported that there would be an invasion from a group of monsters known as the Narak against the Magus Kingdom. They were puzzled because the leader of these monsters should have been defeated by heroes who had made a peace treaty with the demons. One person named Cecil mentioned that this time, the demons were led by a demon named Romeo Vanded, which indeed sounds like a cool name. Vanded was the one who proposed the peace treaty, but it was merely a ploy to distract the kingdom and catch them off guard. Cecil urged the king and princess Fallwise to leave the kingdom immediately because the demons were planning revenge. The king initially refused to abandon his people, But after discussions with Cecil and his advisors, they convinced him to depart for safety. Eventually, the king was persuaded and agreed to leave the kingdom. On the other side, when Al tried to open a door, he accidentally broke it. Suddenly, Testa called out to Al and informed him about a massive invasion of monsters. Testa urged Al to pack his things, but instead of thinking about his own safety, Alabama was concerned about his vegetables that were due to be harvested the next day. He grabbed his sickle and hurried away. Arriving at his field, Alabama heard the sounds of the monsters heading towards the kingdom. He assured himself that it wasn't his concern, but then he realized that if the kingdom was attacked, he wouldn't be able to sell his vegetables in the city. This thought confused him deeply. On the other side, the king, princess, and a few guards were moving away from the kingdom under Cecil's guidance. Suddenly, Cecil attacked the king, shocking the entire group. He swiftly killed the guards who tried to retaliate, achieving a double kill, and then revealed his true form. From the beginning, Cecil was Romeo Vanded, disguised and successfully trapping the king. Vanded had deceived the entire kingdom, and now planned to take over Mega's kingdom by impersonating the king. After finishing his speech, Vanded launched an attack on the king. The king tried to defend himself with his remaining strength, but his defense couldn't hold for long. Fal attempted to assist her father, but even together, they couldn't withstand Vanded's assault. Vanded questioned Fal about the failed kidnapping and the dragon attack, revealing they were part of his evil plan. However, Fal remained silent in response to Vanded's questions. After Vanded successfully swept through their defenses, he intended to eliminate everyone present. But then, our hero arrived. Instead of wielding a sword or similar weapon, Alabama came with a hoe, which seemed odd, but Al managed to thwart Vanded's attack and then launched a counterattack. Vanded wondered aloud about who Al truly was and how he could withstand Vanded's attacks. Al boldly proclaimed that he was just a farmer. Then, Alabama began explaining the techniques he used, overwhelming Vanded's small mind with too much information. Infuriated, Vanded attacked Al. Al managed to block the first attack bare-handed with unbelievable strength. He then forcefully hurled Vanded off a cliff. Growing angrier, Vanded revealed his demon form, killing the monsters around and absorbing their essence. Fal, seeing Vanded's excessively high attributes, urged Al to leave, unaware that Al also possessed remarkably high attributes. Vanded then launched an attack towards Al, but Al managed to defeat him with a single punch, leaving Vanded lying on the ground. After defeating Vanded, the remaining monsters fled in fear. After the chaos in the palace, the king wanted to ask Al to serve his kingdom. Al had a bad feeling and wanted to leave immediately, despite being offered an important position within the kingdom, as he only wished to be a farmer. Fal then fulfilled her promise of giving Al a plot of land measuring 10,000 subo, with the condition that Al must join the guild to be prepared in case of future monster attacks. Al reluctantly accepted the offer. As Al went to see the gift given to him, he started screaming because instead of receiving fertile land, he received barren land like a desert. Inside the kingdom, Alabama was delighted to see the vegetables being sold because he was a vegan and bought some vegan satay. Al was puzzled about why Fal could roam around freely. It turned out that in the palace, Alabama's servant had disguised herself as Fal so she could escape. With her hairpin attribute, no one could recognize Fal as the princess of the kingdom. Then Al arrived at the guild and was immediately met by a large man with a scar on his cheek. The man had heard rumors about Al and escorted him to Helen, the guild's servant with prominent features, to register his name. When Al was about to introduce himself, he suddenly felt hungry, causing a very loud noise. It seemed he needed vegan food to eat. After eating, Alabama explained his reasons for wanting to be a farmer. Suddenly, the guild group who had fought the forest dragon approached Al. They knew Al had defeated the S-rank forest dragon back then. Everyone heard the guild's words and looked at Al in surprise. They then introduced themselves to each other. The bald man named Jake looked like Johnny Sins.
Yeah, boy.
The girl with blue hair named Lumia, and the other one named Luke appeared to be transgender. After the introductions, they invited Al to join them, but Al still refused. Then Al asked Helen for a mission. As a beginner, he had to start from the lowest rank, which was rank G. Al received his first mission, to collect 10 milk grass in the Grim Forest. Helen inspected Al's equipment and then gave him a robe that could slightly increase defense. When Al put on the robe, Helen felt a bit nostalgic. After preparing, Alabama started his first mission and asked Fal to go home because it was too dangerous. In the forest, while Al was searching for the 10th grass, he found a scale. When Al looked at the list of monsters, there shouldn't have been any monsters with scales. Behind him was a female orc with her skimpy attire, who wanted to be impregnated by Al. Now fuck that ass. Al, realizing this, panicked heavily. Fortunately, Jake came and immediately killed the horny orc. Lumia and Luke were also there. Then Al showed the dragon scale he found. Jake knew the scale was from a black dragon, and no one had ever seen that dragon. The sky started to darken, and as they wanted to return, suddenly they were hit by very strong pressure. They all stood still like statues and dared not move. Then a monster resembling a dragon crossed them. Al tried to see the dragon's attributes, but because of the strong aura, the information displayed was very difficult for Al to read. Then Al briefly managed to see the dragon's attributes and was surprised by their number. The scene changes where a girl runs for her life from something, only to find out it was Helen's dream. In the morning, an old woman named One sees Helen's condition, which looks unhealthy, and asks Helen to rest. Then Al arrives at the guild and asks Helen to discuss something. They begin discussing the existence of a black dragon with extremely high attack scores that could easily destroy their kingdom, known as the evil dragon Ouroboros. Hearing that name, Helen suddenly gets dizzy, shocking everyone there. Jake then requests to temporarily seal the grim forest. Al takes out the dragon scale he found, triggering Helen's PTSD and causing her to faint. After that, One explains that Helen was adopted when she was young. One is surprised by the robe Helen gave to Al. When One finds Helen, Helen only remembers her name, and what she has in her hand is the robe worn by Al. Helen was found 15 years ago in the Snooze River. Y'all might think I said Anus River, didn't you? After Al shows the dragon scale, One thinks there might be a connection between Ouroboros and Helen. Al agrees to investigate this case. Then One gives some healing potions to be cautious. As Al leaves the guild, a messenger arrives to deliver a letter from Al's mother. In the library, Alabama reads many books, but finds no information about the Ouroboros dragon. Al then intends to search for records of events from 15 years ago, but is denied permission because only certain people can read those books. Luckily, Fal arrives and asserts her right to read the book she's looking for. Shortly after, Alabama finds the information he was looking for. Due to the day growing dark, Alabama intended to investigate it the next day. The following day, along with Fal, they investigated the village of Honol. The village was completely destroyed. Suddenly, Alabama heard someone calling out and approached the source of the voice. Al saw the ghost of a young child, but Fal could not see it. The child's spirit had been waiting for someone who could hear him, and Al was able to both see and hear him. They wore the same clothes because the robe Al was wearing belonged to the child. Then, fully aware, Alabama put half of his robe on Fal like a typical couple. Fal was slightly surprised by Al's gesture. Then Fal could see the spirit of the child, which startled her. It turns out the child is Helen's deceased younger sibling from the chaos 15 years ago. The child then asks Al to save Helen. A brief flashback, when Helen was young and walking in the forest, Rai, Helen's younger sibling, was practicing swordsmanship, lost balance, and fell. Helen came to help and scolded Rai. The sky suddenly turned dark, and a fire broke out in their village. They ran to see what had happened. Upon arriving, all they saw was the remnants of destruction. Then, the Ouroboros dragon appeared and killed a family. After witnessing this, Rai and Helen fled into the forest, but the dragon found them. They tried to escape, but the dragon flew, shooting fireballs at them. Helen fell, and the dragon cornered them both. As the dragon was about to devour Helen, Rai threw his small knife, hitting the dragon's eye but having no effect. The dragon then attacked Rai, leaving him mortally wounded. Mocking Helen's helplessness, the dragon gave her a chance to live for 15 years, after which it would destroy her home once again. Rai died young. The dragon always leaves one person alive after destroying a town or village, so they can spread fear and absorb negative energy from their experiences. Rai learned all this as he faced the Ouroboros dragon. The dragon's only weakness is strength born from desperation. Then they left the forest while running. Alabama carried Fal and ran very quickly. Upon reaching the gate, they began to prepare the troops to fight the Ouroboros dragon. At his residence, one couldn't find Helen. Somehow, Helen tried to go alone into the forest and meet the Ouroboros dragon with a kitchen knife. Ouroboros appeared before Helen and began to make Helen sink back into despair. Then Helen intended to commit suicide. Seeing Helen so desperate, Ouroboros began to absorb Helen's aura of despair. As Helen was about to stab herself, our hero arrived and saved our mommy milkers. Ouroboros was angry and attacked Al, but Al survived because of the cloak given by Helen and managed to use the healing potion given by one. Ouroboros was surprised that Al could still survive after receiving its attack. Al then stood up and began to run to attack Ouroboros. Al shouted that he was a farmer and managed to land a punch on Ouroboros' head, knocking Ouroboros down, then stood up and prepared for a second attack. Al asked Helen to hide and promised to protect her. Helen remembered her younger brother Rai's words. Ouroboros began to charge towards Al and initiated its attack, but Al managed to evade all of Ouroboros' attacks. Al even landed a punch on Ouroboros' head. But then Ouroboros, like a lizard, attacked Al using its tail, knocking Al to the ground. Ouroboros then attempted to attack Al using its legs, and Al tried to defend against it. Ouroboros then shot a fireball towards Al, which sent Al flying far away. After that, Ouroboros shot another fireball, but Al managed to dodge it and carried Helen away from the scene. While running, Alabama revealed that he had met Helen's brother, Rai. Al conveyed Rai's message that he had no regrets saving Helen and asked Helen to stay happy so that he could be proud. Helen remembered the past when Rai was still alive. Meanwhile, Alabama acted as a motivator and gave Helen hope, like a typical motivator, but it's important to remember, a motivation without action, it's just ejaculation. Wait, it's delusion. Ouroboros flew into the sky and attempted to thwart Al. The sky began to glow, and Ouroboros' attribute score started to drastically decline. Realizing they were no longer afraid of it, Ouroboros became enraged and began to attack. With his increased strength, Alabama managed to land a punch on Ouroboros and blow the supposedly immortal dragon with a single punch. Then, after that, Helen approached Al and suddenly Helen stabbed Al while smiling like a traitor typically would. Helen then pulled her knife out from Al's stomach. When Al tried to use the healing potion given by one, Alabama encountered a stroke of misfortune like Subaru's. Instead, he spilled the healing potion. Helen then attacked Al. Fortunately, Al managed to dodge all of Helen's attacks. Helen licked her knife sword as she did to me. Her eye color turned red. Al tried to heal himself using healing magic and was confused by Helen's actions. Then Helen attacked Al. Suddenly, a glowing object resembling wings appeared and thwarted Helen's attack. It was the doing of the holy dragon, Mirage. Mirage informed Al that Helen was possessed by the evil dragon, Ouroboros. Mirage then bestowed its power upon Al, instantly healing Al's stab wounds thanks to Mirage's strength. After that, Mirage collapsed, near death, the stupid dragon. Back in the kingdom, Thal had prepared troops for defense. Ouroboros underestimated Al, thinking Al wouldn't attack Helen's body. But as Ouroboros rambled on, Alabama landed a punch to his stomach, sending Ouroboros reeling. Al could see Helen's soul through her eyes, which gave him the courage to attack. Al thought he had defeated Ouroboros and reached out to help Helen, but Ouroboros was still possessing her body. Ouroboros exited Helen's body and attempted to attack Al's mind, but all he found was Al tilling the land and planting various vegetables. Ouroboros failed to harm Al and was thrown off balance by his own attack. Mirage woke up from its nap and performed a suicide attack to defeat Ouroboros. Finally, Ouroboros perished simultaneously with Mirage's death. The sky then brightened again, illuminating Al and Helen, who had passed out in the middle of the forest. After the incident, Alabama regained consciousness to find Thal and Helen waiting for him in a room. Thal then hugged Al warmly. Al asked Helen about her condition after being possessed by Ouroboros. Helen then showed something to Al and Thal. She transformed her hand into a dragon's hand. Al and Thal were surprised to see this oddity. Helen could transform all parts of her body into a dragon, starting from her hands, legs, and perhaps her boot. After the incident, Alabama regained consciousness and found Thal and Helen waiting for him in a room. Thal then hugged Al warmly. Al asked Helen about her condition after being possessed by Ouroboros. Helen then showed something to Al and Thal. She transformed her hand into a dragon's hand. Al and Thal were surprised to see this oddity. Helen received this power from Ouroboros and intended to use it for good. Fal was curious about the conversation between Al and Helen, but they denied anything was amiss. Helen then asked about the relationship between Al and Fal. Fal quickly replied that they were just friends. Soon after, everyone else arrived, inquiring about Helen's condition. Jake declared a grand party to celebrate Ouroboros' defeat, which would be hosted by the guild's owner. Luke asked if the palace would give them money, and Fal, disguised, loudly assured everyone they would receive generous rewards. Fortunately, no one suspected Fal's words. They started the party and had fun like any guild would. Al didn't forget about his farm, but Fal understood and urged Al to enjoy himself for just one day. Helen and others performed a show of transforming their body parts into dragon forms. I'm also waiting for something to change, I thought. After that, Alabama returned to his hometown with Testa. While talking, a courier arrived with a letter from Al's father. His father requested Al to come home and visit both parents. Testa convinced Al to go home and see his parents, but Al hadn't finished his guild mission yet. He promised to return home after completing his mission. At the market, Alabama saw a tomato seller, took one, and ate it immediately, savoring the incredible taste after one bite. He asked where the tomato came from. It was from Lurugis. Al ran as fast as lightning back to the guild and asked Helen for permission to leave. Helen was confused why Al suddenly wanted to go home, but agreed to take over Al's tasks and allowed him to leave. Al met Fal, who wanted to accompany him on some missions, but Al wanted to go home to his parents. Fal insisted twice to join Al and meet his parents, but Al refused. When Fal asked for the third time, Alabama fled and disappeared from Fal's sight. On his journey, Alabama imagined what would happen after he arrived in Lurugis. Along the way, he had a bad feeling, and sure enough, there was a male orc waiting for him. This orc was different from the others. He reached out his hand. Al thought the orc was friendly and wanted to be friends with him. The orc asked if Al wanted to do it. This scared Al, and he ran, chased by the orc, who eventually caught him. Al almost got backshot by an orc, damn. Luckily, Alabama was saved by a girl with blue hair. She saw how terrified Al was and gave him water to drink. The girl was surprised to see a regular person wandering in the forest without a guard. Her name was Ruri, one more milk maker for our MC. Ruri asked about Al's purpose, and it turned out they both had the same destination, Lurugis. Since their goals aligned, Ruri invited Al to travel together. Like most men, Alabama briefly had negative thoughts about being alone with a woman. Ruri warned that if Al did anything to harm her, his head would be swiftly chopped off. They then hurriedly departed from there. As the day started to darken, they felt something approaching, and it turned out to be a courier. He received a letter from his mother, informing him of his original purpose in heading to Lurugis to buy fertilizer. Ruri was confused, so Al explained at length, which left Ruri feeling dizzy. Al asked Ruri why she was returning to Lurugis, and she seemed visibly saddened. Ruri pulled out camping equipment from her magical pouch. She inherited the pouch from her ancestors. When Ruri was about to reveal who her ancestors were, Alabama's stomach growled loudly. At night, they ate dinner together. Then Al asked Ruri why she was going to Lurugis. Initially, Ruri went there just to train, but she heard strange rumors about Lurugis from a merchant and started investigating alone. Ruri did all this because she is descended from a hero. Al was worried about Ruri's safety because she was a girl, and if anything happened to her. Al's statement left Ruri speechless, and she became like a statue, despite Al's attempts to snap her out of it. Ruri only regained awareness after Al started shouting. Ruri daydreamed because it was the first time someone had worried about her. After finishing dinner, they prepared to sleep. Al spread out his sleeping mat. Ruri invited Al to sleep together inside the tent. What kind of luck is this? Al still refused Ruri's offer. Ruri then reminded Al about the orc. Upon hearing the word orc, Al panicked and agreed to sleep together inside the tent. Inside the tent, Alabama was surprised by Ruri's preparations. Ruri had made these preparations because she wanted to talk to someone until she fell asleep. Then, after turning off the light, Alabama began his story, but realized that Ruri had already fallen asleep. Al intended to sleep as well. Before long, Ruri kicked Al's stick, causing Al's sleep to turn into a night full of injuries. The next day, they arrived in Lurigus with Al's body covered in bandages. After entering Lurigus, they were about to part ways. Rory was very happy about their journey and hoped that Al would hire her, of course, as his guard. Al asked Rory to become his guard. Al went to meet his father, while Rory tried to find out the truth about the rumors of demons in Lurigus, but she found nothing about the rumors. Lurigus was often insulted and considered a failure as the descendant of heroes. Suddenly, a girl's voice screamed. The girl's younger sister had been kidnapped by a demon. On the other side, Alabama arrived at his parents' house. As he was about to ring the bell, suddenly something emerged from inside the house and bumped into him. It was his mother, Lucia. A man appeared and hit Al because he thought Al was being intimate with his wife. The man didn't realize he was hitting his own son. Lucia went berserk and dragged her husband into the house. While they were eating, Alabama's father sat quietly, only eating something black. Al ate his mother's cooking and accidentally mentioned Rory's name. This piqued his mother's curiosity, but Al's father thought Rory was Al's girlfriend. His father's words put him in danger because Lucia was very aggressive when it came to discussing women who were close to Al. After dinner, Alabama asked his father for help finding something he had misplaced. He also inquired about the rumors of demons that had been circulating, though such things had never occurred. His father advised Al to rest because he would be going to the salt factory the next day. Al promptly went to sleep in his father's room, as his mother was already waiting for him to sleep together. The next day, as he was about to leave to find salt, Alabama heard someone screaming. He approached the source of the noise and saw a crowd gathered around a man who claimed to have been attacked by a demon and saved by a girl with blue hair. Al recognized her as Rory and immediately went into the forest to find her. The man looked towards Al and smiled, dispelling the illusion he had created. Using magic, the man had deceived Al. In the forest, while Al was searching for Rory, he heard a woman screaming. It was the same woman Rory had saved earlier, now being attacked by a giant Alaska worm. Al quickly struck the monster and destroyed it, but he felt something was amiss. The woman then hugged Al and instantly transformed into a larger worm. Rory arrived and cut the monster in half. After defeating the worm monster, a man appeared, praising Rory and belittling her as unworthy of being a hero. This man introduced himself as Loki Diva. Loki took an interest in Al for defeating the demon commander and the evil dragon Ouroboros. Rory tried to attack Loki, but ended up injured and sprawled on the ground. Al used his healing skills to tend to Rory. Al attempted to attack Loki, but all his strikes were evaded, and he ended up receiving powerful blows from Loki, creating large craters in the ground. Undeterred, Alabama jumped up and managed to land a hit on Loki, though it didn't seem to do any damage. In retaliation, Loki struck back with immense force, sending Al flying a great distance. Al then asked Loki why he wanted him. Loki revealed that he sought to destroy anyone who stood in his way, targeting not only Al and Rory, but also Helen. Loki divulged information about the powers of good and evil gods. He then unleashed an attack with 2 large Alaska worms. Al managed to dodge, but Rory, with her intelligence, froze in place, forcing Al to rescue her. Al attempted to attack one worm, but another suddenly appeared behind him, putting him in a precarious position. Rory came to his aid and urged Al to step back, but he refused and joined her in attacking the monsters. Together, they destroyed both worms. Loki created a purplish-black orb and launched it at them, causing explosions all around. Al and Rory managed to withstand the onslaught, but Rory suddenly came under attack from below Sus' face, and the worm restrained Al's movements. Loki then intended to kill Rory, bidding her farewell as he prepared to strike. Suddenly, the worm that had restrained Al became brittle and crumbled due to the salt Al had brought. Al then attempted to attack, but his strike was too slow and evaded by Loki. Seeing Al's struggle, Rory realized she had been too quick to give up. She then stabbed Loki from behind, but her blade proved ineffective against Loki's powerful sword. Undeterred, Rory tapped into the power of the good gods and successfully killed Loki. After defeating Loki, Alabama fainted in Rory's arms. Rory realized she had developed feelings for Al. Later that night, Alabama woke up suddenly and screamed, causing their heads to collide like bouncing balls. When Al looked at Rory, his face turned red. Since it was already late at night, they decided to head home. On the way, Rory heard a voice that frightened her. It was Lucia's voice. Realizing her mother was nearby, Alabama carried Rory and quickly fled the area. Finally escaping the forest, they went to their respective homes. While walking alone, Alabama remembered his childhood trying to escape with Testa. As he approached the door, he found his mother waiting inside. Startled, he closed the door quickly, only to find Lucia standing behind him. Al ran into his room, leaving his father outside. The next day, Lucia had stayed up all night worrying about Al's father. She pleaded with Al not to leave, but Al threatened to resent her if she continued to interfere. Strengthening his resolve to become a farmer, Alabama left his parents behind. Rory was already waiting for him on the road. In the palace, Fal was preparing to go somewhere, and the king apologized to his daughter, though the reason was unclear. Meanwhile, Alabama and Rory arrived at the Union, where Rory met Helen. Instantly, a significant competition unfolded. In his field, Alabama found a child attempting to steal his eggplants. Helen and Rory arrived. Al was very upset because the child was picking eggplants that were still too young. If they were left to ripen, they could grow up to 10 times larger than their current size. Al then went to fetch mature vegetables and gave them to the child. Suddenly, the bell signaling the arrival of monsters rang out. Al and the others immediately rushed off. When they arrived, Jake, Luke, Lamia, and the guards were already battling the monsters. There were a great number of monsters, but Helen transformed into a half-dragon, firing a Kamehameha that killed many monsters. Al used his farming tools to defeat numerous monsters as well. However, the monsters seemed endless. Shortly after, a man on horseback arrived wielding a holy sword. He commanded the monsters to retreat. Seeing this, the monsters slowly withdrew. Al and the others were astonished by the man on horseback's abilities. At night, Fal visited Al's residence. His intention was to bid farewell and not return. Fal's servant asked him to leave immediately, then bid farewell to Al. The next day, a woman with a child who had stolen vegetables from Al came to apologize and buy some vegetables belonging to Al. The teleportation messenger appeared next to Al, waving his hand simultaneously with Al, which surprised him. The messenger brought a letter from Al's mother and showed the latest newspaper, the contents of which surprised Al. In the Union, Rory and Helen discussed the news of Fal's marriage to Prince Antisberg, the person who stopped the monster attack with the holy sword. Rory felt strange because monsters don't understand human language, but they obeyed him. Shortly after, Alabama arrived and showed the contents of the letter from his mother. Lucia revealed that the holy sword had no power and was forged by an ordinary blacksmith. Lucia also disclosed that she used to be a shadow puppet, an organization secretly seeking information. The leader of the monsters that previously attacked was a demon, forced to do so because the demon's lover was being held hostage. Antisberg used this to attack Magus and then appeared as a hero. In return, Antisberg had to marry Fal as a token of gratitude. Al was very excited to save Fal, making Helen and Rory curious about his relationship with Fal. Fortunately, Alabama managed to keep them from suspecting anything. With their help, they quickly set off to rescue Fal. In the neighboring kingdom, Prince Nettle was holding a conference with leaders from other countries, who asked Nettle for help in protecting their countries from monster attacks. After the conference ended, Nettle was pleased with successfully deceiving the leaders of other countries. There, a demon named Garzel, manipulated by Nettle, pleaded to stop Nettle's actions and asked to be released. However, Nettle refused the demon's request and threatened to harm his lover. Fal arrived but did not contribute anything. On the other side, Alabama and the others quickly hurried off. Reeks also obtained the procedure to enter through one of his friends in Antisberg. Reeks asked the others to go by horse-drawn carriage while he would inform the monsters about the truth of Nettle's holy sword. Reeks revealed his long-held secret. He too is a shadow puppet and a demon, cared for by Lucia. Afterward, they began their plan to rescue the prisoners. The next day, Fal was ready for the wedding ceremony, while Al and the others managed to sneak past the guards and move between buildings to rescue the prisoners. Al was confident in their disguises, but the attire caused a major nerf to Helen and Rory. Al, still confident, believed their disguises would work, but they were immediately discovered by the guards upon meeting them. They fled in disarray, and then Helen used her power to throw Al directly towards where Garzel's lover was held. Shortly after, the guards arrived. Al used the vegetables with lightning breath, swiftly defeating the guards. As they were about to escape, the woman's legs were shackled to prevent her from moving freely. Al had to carry her and run away from the guards. Outside the kingdom, Reeks prepared for an attack. Meanwhile, in the palace, when Nettle was about to kiss Fal, the church door crashed into Nettle like truck cun. It was Al's doing, and Fal instantly became very happy. Nettle tried to stop Al with his sword. Al, knowing Nettle's facade, then exposed his secret in public. However, King Magus believed all of Nettle's lies because he had seen Nettle defeat monsters with his sword before. Then a guard came and informed them that many monsters were attacking their country. This made Nettle panic, unable to do anything when the guests asked him to use his holy sword. The guests don't know that Nettle's sword is not greater than their sword that can increase the human population. Nettle attempted to summon Garzel, but he saw Garzel embracing his lover. At that moment, Reeks brought Nettle's holy sword to save the guests, but Nettle appeared hesitant. Al then took the sword and threw it towards the monsters nearby. One of the monsters bit into the sword and destroyed it, shocking the guests. Finally, Garzel revealed that Nettle's actions had all been a charade. Nettle, overcome, began laughing hysterically. It turned out Nettle had planned to send the monsters to attack Magus when the king and princess were absent from the kingdom. But our milkmakers managed to save the kingdom of Magus thanks to the adventurers of the Union. The palace guards arrived, making Nettle pleased, and he ordered his soldiers to capture everyone there. However, Helen and Rory had already used Brain Root on the guards and captured Nettle. Angry, Nettle intended to attack the king, but Al used his vegetables to stop the attack and delivered a powerful blow to Nettle, knocking him to the ground. Nettle ended up being arrested. Afterward, Fal ran to hug Al and expressed her feelings. Rory, hearing this, was very surprised and showed her tsundere nature. The king thanked them for saving him twice and wanted to give something to Al. Al had a bad feeling about it. Then, the king accepted Al as his son-in-law and left them. Outside, the king received a letter from Reeks. Reeks knew someone was trying to control Nettle and warned the king to be cautious. After that, Alabama and the others returned to the Union to celebrate Al's success. At that moment, Fal arrived as a princess and surprised everyone with her presence. She also brought many gifts for the Union, causing everyone to scramble for the gifts. Afterward, in her disguised mode, Fal declared war on Rory to compete for our main character's attention. After that, Alabama went to his field. In his field, Alabama was approached by Rory and Fal, who wanted Al to choose between them. However, Alabama tried to change the subject. Al said that there was a girl he liked, then promptly left Rory and Fal. Al went to a house to deliver vegetables to his childhood friend named Ilvia. 15 years ago, in the village of Sirius, when Al was still young, he enjoyed farming and always shared his harvest with others. While distributing food to others, Alabama saw an orphan girl named Ilvia who was caught stealing vegetables from a farmer. Despite being pitied, Ilvia stole a potato that Al brought. In the forest, Ilvia ate the vegetables she had stolen. Shortly after, she was found by Al, who brought her a bowl of soup. The next day, Alabama returned and brought food for Ilvia, but she hid in a tree and came down after Al left. On the third day, Alabama returned again, and this time Ilvia didn't hide. She began to bravely talk to Al, and this is where their childhood story began. Al's stomach growled with hunger, and Ilvia intended to share her food, but two men who had chased her before arrived and caught her. They intended to seek revenge for the losses caused by Ilvia. Fortunately, Alabama's father arrived and compensated the farmers with a handful of rice. Since then, Ilvia became a member of Al's family. 2 years later, while in the field, Testa shouted as he was being chased by killer bees. Lucia arrived and eliminated the group of bees. After being rescued, Testa exaggeratedly praised Lucia, increasing Al's father's desire to kill. After that, both parents went to look for a house, and after they left, Testa showed the treasure map and asked Al to go back at night. In the forest, Testa said that when Ilvia was alone, she was often harassed by people nearby, which is why Ilvia always clung to Al. Suddenly, Testa stepped on a secret button and opened a secret door, causing them to fall into the secret room. Testa found a stone with writing on it, and when Al touched the stone, a sudden purple light shone and caused Al to enter the subconscious of a monster. At that moment, there was also an eruption of Mount. Al eventually woke up in an evacuation tent and looked outside, seeing his world covered in ash and devastated. When he saw the damage, Testa's parents were found. While Al and Ilvia saw people suffering from food shortages, Al went to check on his crops. Suddenly, Alabama experienced pain and collapsed. At night, Ilvia intended to steal again to give to the dying Al, but this time she changed her mind. The next day, Ilvia gave her ration of food to Al to help him recover quickly. She did this every day until one day she couldn't bear it anymore and died of starvation. Tester rushed in and informed Al that Ilvia had passed away. He also learned that there had been no help from the capital all this time. At Ilvia's funeral, Alabama blamed himself for her death. That was Al's past. One night, Alabama fought and easily defeated a dragon. After the battle, he discovered a girl who had fainted nearby. The next morning, Alabama woke up to find the girl he had rescued in front of him. She mistakenly accused Al of kidnapping her while she was unconscious, and instead of being grateful, she harbored suspicion. The girl, named Linnea, intended to report her mission at the Union. Al invited her to accompany him since he was also heading there. Shortly after, Rory arrived and was surprised to see another girl at Al's residence. She suspected they were involved in something suspicious, as you might expect. At the Union, Helen understood Al's situation, and Linnea explained the odd occurrences in her village. Al was willing to help, but when he heard the name Gaul Village, he was greatly surprised and happy because Aspara was there. After that, Alabama took Linnea shopping for clothes. Linnea was puzzled why Al was being kind to her and accused him of having ulterior motives, but she ended up holding Al's hand and inviting him to go with her. In the alley between buildings, Rory witnessed what was happening in front of her, and you probably know what happened. On their journey, they were chased by a horde of orcs who wanted to either stab Al or be stabbed by him, causing Linnea to faint. After waking up, they arrived in Gaul Village. As Linnea got off, the carriage driver recounted Linnea's actions while Al was unconscious. He praised her for taking care of Al and ensuring they arrived safely. They finally arrived in Gaul Village, where they were briefly detained by guards. However, upon seeing Lucia, the guards let them pass. While walking around, Alabama spotted the food he had been looking for, but the cook burned it and behaved strangely, as did the people around him with their odd stares. Al was puzzled by the strangeness happening around him. Suddenly, someone kidnapped Al, but fortunately, he managed to escape. Meanwhile, Linnea invited Al to stay at her house temporarily. The next day, while investigating the odd occurrences, they were approached by a nobleman named Rimur, the head of Gaul Village, who also discovered the recipe for Aspara. Rimur invited Al to dine with him. However, Alabama was kidnapped again by the same two people. Al and Linnea realized something was amiss and decided to go to the village chief's house prepared. At Rimur's house, they were warmly welcomed. Al wasted no time and spoke directly to the point about the strangeness happening in Gaul Village. However, Alabama was confronted and forced to cooperate instead. Such threats didn't intimidate Al, and after defeating the guards, Alabama attempted to attack Rimur. Strangely, Linnea intervened to stop Al. Suddenly, Rimur revealed something from his body. Turns out, Rimur was being controlled by a demon named Brita. Brita had planted her power in the statue of the goddess in the center of town and planned to do the same in the capital to control the world. She also claimed Al was part of her plan, while Linnea believed Brita intended to harm her parents. Afterward, Alabama set off a flashbang grenade. Brita mistook it for an illusion. Suddenly, Brita's controlling magic vanished because the goddess statue Brita used had been destroyed. Brita thought it was Al's magic. Al explained the flashbang was just a marker. Rory and Helen then destroyed the goddess statue outside. It turned out Rory and Helen had kidnapped Al twice to devise a plan, and now Al had successfully thwarted Brita's plan. Next, Brita intended to kill Rimur if anyone approached. With his out-of-the-box idea, Alabama used Aspara and inserted it into Rimur's mouth like a dildo. Finally, Rimur regained consciousness and cried because he was eating his own food. Seeing her plan fail because of humans, Brita became furious. Al then unleashed a one-punch man on Brita, defeating her with a single blow. After the chaos ended, Alabama received a reward from Linnea, a talisman, and a kiss on the cheek. She also promised to kiss Al on the lips. Afterward, Alabama left the town of Gaul. In the field, Alabama and the others walked together farming. Fal noticed Rory and Helen wearing the pendants given by Al. Fal felt jealous because he was the only one who didn't receive a pendant, and became even more upset upon realizing there was another woman with Al in the village of Gaul. Suddenly, Alabama shouted loudly because there were creeping plants damaging their crops. Afterward, they went to sell their produce at the market. Jake came to buy some vegetables and invited them to drink at the Union. Suddenly, Fal hid because his father, the king, arrived wearing a robe to buy vegetables from Al. The king offered Al a farm if he would marry Fal. Al was intrigued by the offer, but Rory tried to restrain him. Fal threw a potato at Rory for obstructing Al, but Rory dodged it and it hit Al, causing him to faint. While unconscious, Alabama heard a woman's voice calling his name like a goddess, but he suddenly regained consciousness and found himself facing the king. After selling out their goods, they went home. On the way home, Reeks met Al, and they saw a child being captured by suspicious individuals, one of whom looked like a character from an NTR anime. Al intended to rescue the child and subdued 2 attackers, leaving one overweight person who fled the scene. The girl turned out to be a demon. Reeks recognized her as he himself was a demon. Her name was Yulia, the only daughter of the Demon King who would succeed as the leader of the demon race. Yulia asked Al for help for the demon race, explaining that she was forced to leave by her servant named Volp de Ma because their place was no longer safe. Al agreed to help Yulia. In return, Reeks had to clean pests from Al's fields. Afterward, Alabama chose to run instead of using a boat. They finally arrived in the evening. As Al glanced at Yulia, he caught a glimpse of Ilvia. Shortly after, Demay appeared and suddenly attacked Al and Yulia. Fortunately, Alabama managed to dodge Demay's attack, leaving Yulia bewildered. Demay then launched another attack, but Al successfully parried the second strike, receiving a scratch on his face. However, Demay didn't stop there and continued to assault them. Al swiftly moved and attempted to counterattack, but ended up getting hit. Then, Alabama used the Hurricane no Jutsu, teleporting behind Demat. Al kicked Demay's head like kicking a ball, knocking him flat on the ground. While they were distracted, Demay prepared to launch a full attack, but Lucia suddenly appeared out of nowhere and struck Demay on the head, knocking him unconscious. Lucia came because Reeks had informed her that Al was going to the demon territory. They quickly headed to the palace, where they found the guards already dead. Yulia rushed into the king's chamber and found him in critical condition. Al noticed a surviving guard. Shortly after, Lucia suddenly attempted to kill Yulia. Fortunately, Alabama managed to intervene and stop Lucia's attack. Al realized it wasn't his mother, because if it were, she would have hugged him until his bones were crushed. Lucia laughed, acknowledging that Al had seen through her disguise. She then called Al brother and transformed into a girl with purple hair. She was Ilvia, Alabama's stepsister who had died when they were young. Al was profoundly shocked to see Ilvia, who was supposed to be gone, alive due to the power of the evil god, a deity bearing all sorrow and suffering. Ilvia then demonstrated the power bestowed by the evil god and attacked Al. Her strike swept away everything in its path, even causing mountains to split. Al managed to dodge the attack, but he was astounded by the devastating effects of Ilvia's strike. Ilvia was slightly impressed that Al could evade her attack, despite the evil power sealed within him. Al's power as a nature lover was also a part of the skills granted by the evil god. Ilvia invited Al to join her and promised to explain everything. Yulia intervened, alerting Al. Ilvia grew furious as Yulia intended to disrupt her plans and swiftly grabbed Yulia by the throat. Al tried to stop Ilvia, but she was too strong. Ilvia then intended to kill Yulia. Suddenly, Alabama's pendant began to glow, halting everything. A goddess who had appeared when Al fainted at the market came to his aid. She was the benevolent deity often spoken of. The goddess asked Al to extend his hand so that she could remove the power of the evil god residing within him. Al gained the power of the benevolent goddess, and he decided to turn back time to save Yulia. Time reversed to the moment just before Ilvia was about to kill Yulia. Al unleashed his power from the benevolent goddess. Initially, the power seemed useless, but moments later, plants transformed into tentacles and bound Ilvia. Ilvia easily destroyed the plants and drew a sword to attack. Al used the plants as a shield, and they wrapped around Ilvia's feet once again, successfully binding her. Demay arrived and fired a Kamehameha towards Ilvia. After the chaos, Ilvia rose and attacked Demea swiftly, moving to kill him. However, just as she was about to strike, she stopped abruptly and left Al and the others. Following this, the Demon King arrived and questioned the relationship between Al and Ilvia. As Al prepared to leave, Yulia hugged him, which angered Demea, who pulled Yulia away from Al. Interestingly, Demea harbored strong feelings for Yulia. During their journey home, Alabama reflected on Yulia's words and remembered a childhood event when he and Testa ventured into a cave. Al encountered Testa, who was tending to his plants. Unable to find any information, Alabama invited Testa to go to the capital, but Testa refused, unwilling to leave his place. On their journey, as usual, Alabama was chased by a female orc who desired him. This time, however, Alabama confronted the orc, but found his punches ineffective, forcing him to flee once again from a potentially uncomfortable encounter. Jake and his companions intervened to save Al, surprised at how weak he seemed against the orc. Al sought counsel from Helen and Rory at the Union. Shortly after, Reeks arrived with a letter from Lucia, as usual. While Al was partying with the Union members, his mind was occupied by thoughts of Ilvia, but he didn't mind because he now had a good life surrounded by boba milk producers and fields full of vegetables. On the other hand, the story ended with Ilvia waiting for Al's arrival.